It's Easter Day 2020, in the middle of this COVID pandemic. No, that wasn't a slip of the tongue. And I thought I'd have some time today to give my tips on how to blow out this fear, which is, I think, the major part of this situation. I was inspired to do it because we were getting a lot of messages on the Human Unleashed about the videos that we've been doing about this situation. And one of the main things that people were saying was how impressed they were about how calm we all were, how chilled out in the face of this chaos. Now, I don't know about the other boys, but I thought I'd give my tips on why I'm pretty chilled out during this. The other inspiration was the recent interview on London Real with Brian Rose interviewing David Icke. I think what you like about David Icke, and in the old days he used to go on about all sorts of reptilian business of the royals eating babies and stuff. If you've disregarded him for that, as I did for many years, maybe reconsider. Because what he's going on about in that video is really pretty well documented. It's pretty basic stuff that is unfolding in front of our eyes right now. I won't go too much into any of that or the politics of it or this situation itself. We go into that a lot on our free talks on COVID-19 that you'll find on thehumanunleashed.com. I'll put a load of links underneath of the things that I'm mentioning, but I'll put that underneath and you can have a look at those videos. We go into many of the things in there. What really impressed me, though, well, actually, I'll come to that in a minute, but I think it's obvious he's hitting home because that video hit 10 million views very quickly. Brian Rose at London Real got weeded out by the BBC, who started trying to discredit him and saying that it was all conspiracy theories. Well, I think it's conspiracies. I'd rather not put the theories on the end, but it just shows that he's hit a nerve, I'm sure. But what really impressed me was his ending to it, where it surprised me, actually. It was lovely. After all that horror and all the sort of plans of the New World Order and all of this sort of thing, he said the reason why he's not frightened is because he's made this shift into some higher state of consciousness, if you like. It's a very small shift. And this really resonated with me, and I wanted to come out of the closet, I guess, and talk about what he actually meant. I think it's very important. I think it's an elusive thing to get hold of, and so I thought I'd do my best to explain it. Shortly after I listened to that interview, I also listened to the London Real interview with Sadhguru. I managed to struggle through it, but I have to say I thought it was a load of complete waffle. Just regurgitated Hindu stuff, all the old spiritual dogma that really isn't getting anybody anywhere. There were a couple of gems in there. I think it would take more than a layman to figure out which ones they were, but there was some proper dangerous advice in there. Like, for instance, he was saying you should strengthen your immune system by eating a vegetarian diet, particularly a southern Indian diet. And he only has to visit my hometown to see the devastation that's caused in the north of England. He was recommending it to English people. And I think this is the thing. The day of the guru is over. People have put them on pedestals too much and think that they're experts in everything. They're not. They've just made this small shift. Maybe they've gone beyond that too, but I'll come to that later. But thinking that they're an expert on anything but that is quite dangerous. I won't go more into that, but if you want to see about why I mentioned the devastation in my own hometown, I have a video, I'll link that below as well, about diet brainwashing, why spiritual people still die of cancer, or one of the reasons anyway. So for me, I've always been a very lazy bugger. I've just wanted to dig out simplicity from everything, to dig out the gems from each branch of knowledge. For example, in the diet world, I've become known as this meat guy, and I'd actually rather talk about this. I'd rather, when I do consultations with people, quite very often it's people with autoimmunity. I've talked about that and my journey out of it in my book, and also about awakening and why resisting that can lead to autoimmunity and all sorts of problems. I've also I'll put a link to that as well below. I see everything as just trying to weed out from all the science and all of the misinformation and all of the dogma, what are the things that actually work. And in the diet thing, this has been, you know, for me, it's been a lifetime study, 40 years or so before I figured out eat beef, salt and water, and then reintroduce foods one at a time if you want to. You know, you don't always have to go back to beef, salt and water if you're very ill. I've covered that in many other videos. And I've also covered the link between diet and spirituality. But so this is what I'm trying to do here with this. I'm going to give some tips later. But first of all, I'd like to set the stage, if you like, of what awakening is. What is this big mystery, and why I might be qualified to talk about it. I'm sort of shy. I think at the moment it's a good time to talk about it, and I'll come out of the closet. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days and sort of bottling out of it, and then I think, oh, I'll do it, I won't do it, I won't do it. But it's funny talking about awakening because it's built up to be this massive, unattainable thing that only a few yogis in strange underpants in caves ever attain. And if you talk about something like this that's happened to you, you tend to get people saying, who the hell do you think you are? You know, why are you talking about this? And so what happened to me? Well, back in 2006 or so, after many, many years of being involved in the TM movement and doing massive amounts of spiritual practice and study, I decided to let it all go. I was standing in the back garden. I let go of every vestige of spirituality. I said, I've had enough. And in that moment, there was a shift that never went away. It became very clear to me how we are connected to everything, this sort of unity consciousness, if you like. And it was stunning. I mean, even to me, who was prepared for it, or at least I thought I was, I had to just sit there on a wall, chill out and let it sink in. And it actually took a couple of years to sink in, like it often does. There's a stabilization period, like with Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie or whatever. Sometimes it can be a bit disorientating. But after a while, it becomes fairly natural. And my story of that, you can see my Buddha at the gas pump interview with my great friend Rick Archer back in 2015. I haven't talked about it too much since. There's a few other things I've done to expand on that particular moment and what happened afterwards, and I'll link to those underneath. I also did what it was the blog post that Rick Archer based our interview on. It was my list of misconceptions about enlightenment or waking up. I'll put that in there, so I won't go on about too much about what it isn't. Let's see if I can describe what it is. I think these days a lot of people are waking up. There is some kind of a tipping point. So maybe it's easier. Maybe what I say today might be useful to somebody and it might tip them over. I mean, it's very arrogant of me to say in a way that I might have any way of explaining this that gurus down the ages have failed to get across to people, and I'm certainly no guru, please, not at all. Since that interview I did with Batgap, and just before, I spent my time listening to every single tale I could of people's awakenings, 500 plus on Batgap, God knows how many others, looking for some sort of a common factor. What is it that actually, what is it that triggers it? Is it long spiritual practice? It was so many things. I mean, there maybe might have been three common factors, one, two, or three of them. One is tremendous hardship, suffering, that kind of thing. Secondly is a great desire for it, a great interest in it. And thirdly is surrender, complete surrender, wiping out everything you always thought you knew and that kind of thing. Those were the three things. But still, what is it? That's what I'm going to try and explain here, which is probably an impossible task. I'm kind of getting a bit overwhelmed by it. So, okay. I think, first of all, there are things you can do. It's not about awakening, but in this time when you're locked up at home, perhaps you didn't have time to get your daily routine together and actually generate some happiness and some peace that might let you even think about sitting down and doing some of the things I'm going to say. And I've done a blog post called The Ideal Day, putting it all together, all the basic things that we talk about in great detail. And I'll put a link to that. So, and there's other links that go off that for more investigation. How to structure your day for boosting your immune system, helping your mitochondria to function correctly. But the point of this video, what exactly did David Icke mean? Okay. We're not talking about superpowers, siddhis, clairvoyance, channeling. We're not talking about anything like that, being able to hover or disappear. We're talking about the very simple shift. It's not an experience. It is the canvas that all our experiences are painted on. That's what we're trying to see here. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Like one of those puzzles where you look at it immediately and it looks like a load of blobs and patterns, random patterns. But if you kind of go cross-eyed, or if you focus through it, maybe a picture will appear in 3D. And then it suddenly jumps out at you. And once you've seen it, as I said, you can't unsee it. This is like the experience of awakening, this little shift. I think it's time to demystify the taboo about what might be just our basic natural ancestral state, the daddy of all ancestral disconnects, of not realizing this, not living from that basis. I should say many of the ancient tribes, many of the modern tribes might well live in this state and they don't even think about it. It's just normal to them. It's not a big deal like we make it out in the West and pay for millions of courses and nonsense and mantras and Ayurvedic medicines made of sugar and cow shit and heavy metals and plant toxins. You know, you got to take all this and then you'll be all purified. It's all rubbish, really. It's funny, I can hear my friend Tristan Haggard turning in his chair, because he's still alive, obviously, very much so. And he does a wonderful job at blowing up all sorts of myths, and he's really living his truth. But he always says, oh, don't listen to all these, well, how does he say, degenerate, new age nonsense. And I really take his point. You know, I mean, I've said about Sadhguru, and he's saying, no, we're made in the image and likeness of God, and we must follow our path, and we must not think of all this oneness and everybody's all one. I take his point. When you actually have this shift, it doesn't mean that you're all airy-fairy. It doesn't mean that you just sit in a chair, maybe for a month or so, or a bit longer, or whatever, if it shocks you. But when it happens, but you will become more who you are, more of yourself, and you'll be able to follow your path. You'll be able to stand up against this nonsense that's going on at the moment, all the misinformation on the media, and there's no reason why you can't do that. Waking doesn't make you docile and uncaring. It'll make you even more caring. The advantages are many, but a few of them, people say I'm calm and chilled out. I'm actually quite a natural panicker and hypochondriac, but this is gone. And anger, things like that. Well, it's not that it's gone as such. You get the same impulse, but it's gone, like a stone dropping in a pond. The ripples are gone quite quickly. And instead of being in a full fight or flight mode all day, you go back to the ancestral fight or flight mode, where it's like, whoa, that's scary. Oh no, it's not. You know, oh, I'm angry with them. Oh no, I'm not. And things dissipate very quickly because you don't take yourself so seriously. The ego is dropped, and it turns your intuition on. It's like zooming out. You know, you look at a small cloud covering the sun through a telescope or binoculars, and it seems hopeless. The sun's never coming out, everything's blocked out. But if you zoom out or look away out down the side of the telescope with the binoculars, you can see a blue sky and a small cloud passing over the sun. It gives you a bigger perspective in things. Like Rick Archer often says, dropping some mud into a glass makes it very muddy. Drop it into a bath or something, it'll be a little bit muddy. Drop it into a big pond or an ocean, you won't notice it. This is the thing, you're coming from a wider viewpoint, a wider point of consciousness, although it's not a point. I'll come to that in a bit. Our biggest fear, and that's happening at the moment with this COVID thing, is a fear of the unknown. Financial, health, world situation, and a fear of death. These are the two main fears. But if you think about it, every single day of your life has been like that. You could get hit by a bus. You could drop from a heart attack. The sky could fall on your head, like in the Asterix comics. Today is no different. It's just that we got this one ogre to blame it on. And the ogre isn't quite the ogre it seems, but I'm trying not to get sucked into any of the COVID thing. You'll go and look at our Human Unleashed talks for that. It gives us great open-mindedness and an ability to look at everything and take the good things out, instead of slamming one person because of one belief or one line of thought because most of it's nonsense. There's always a gem everywhere. It takes away the power of any oppressors or brainwashers so that they don't have that control over us, and we can speak our truth. We can rise up against these things that are going on with great confidence. Now, in these tips, I'm not going to mention meditation. I think it's a bit misleading. It's lovely and it gives you great feelings and it can be quite blissful, and takes away a lot of stress, and it's a very good technique, but it's not waking up. It's not about waking up. Some people feel that they've woken up during meditation, great, but you know, some sages feel like they've woken up watching a cat watching a mouse hole, or crossing a street, or listening. I think one Zen master listening to the sound of his own turd hitting the water. So I don't think it actually correlates with something that you're doing as such. One thing that is great, though, for hosing the mud off the car before you polish the wing mirrors, we're trying to figure out what awakening is gratitude. Now, my good friend Dr. Jeremy Ayres, in The Human Unleashed, he often mentions a client of his who couldn't find anything to be grateful about, but then decided she was grateful for her washing machine. Just that, so she didn't have to go to the laundrette and she could do her own washing. And that's beautiful. Start somewhere. If you wake up and you're frightened, it means you're frightened of something. You're frightened of dying? You're still alive? Excellent. Be grateful for that. The practice of gratitude, I think, is huge. It isn't waking up, but it can lead you to a point where you figure your life is worth living enough to maybe take that chair out into the garden, sit next to a lake if you're still allowed to drive somewhere, I don't know, and just sit there and do these couple of tips that I'll go through here. So gratitude. Wake up in the morning. It's in my ideal day blog as well. Wake up in the morning and just think of everything that you're really grateful for. Your family, your kids. I can run through millions of them when I wake up. It's lovely. And it takes away that nonsense of oh, it's another horrible day. It's another... Okay, finally, right, the tips. Let's get on to them. There are a million techniques out there. And I feel that there are a very few which do actually give a pointer to... It's not exactly the experience. There isn't even a word in English for what it is to realize this state of how we live. But there are a couple of pointers that might point to it. One thing, maybe they're very clear to me in retrospect, because some of them weren't when I was sort of a spiritual seeker and striving for awakening or enlightenment or whatever you call it. And the first one is a little sketch. I think it was Tim Freak who said this originally. None of these are mine. Well, neither of these are mine. I'm actually going to only do two. I want simplicity here. Okay, take dreaming. If you dream, most of us do, and if you remember it, you'll remember a situation. Any situation, walking down the road, making love to somebody. flying, whatever it is you're doing, there are other people involved, there are other objects, there's cars driving down the street maybe, there's buildings that you might go in and out of, all of these things, and it's very real to you. Although mostly, if you'll notice, you don't have a body. Very rarely anyway. It's just a scene that you're seeing. What is that scene? What are those trees? What are the cars? What are the zombies chasing you? They are you. And you can realize this very simply when you wake up. This might seem strange, but this is pretty much what's happening when we're awake. But we get so wrapped up in the ego and the body and the single point of perception that it's very difficult to see or to internalize. Now that might give you a glimpse as to what's going on. Now how do you see that? Okay, many years ago, I think I was about 18 years old, I bought a book called On Having No Head by Douglas Harding. Now I read a load of books back then, Autobiography of a Yogi, all the Carlos Castaneda stuff. It was very entertaining and I enjoyed them more because it was all the peripheral stuff, all the flashy stuff, which is actually sort of Sadhguru stuff. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant really, and the books don't really teach you how to do anything. But I bought this book On Having No Head, and I thought it was actually the most boring book I owned, but I kept going back to it. I found it recently, and all the pages are pulled out. I must have been through it 1,000 times. I always felt there was something amazing in there, but I could not grasp it. Since 2006, it's made complete and utter sense to me, and I think if I'd had to pick one thing, his ideas are perhaps the clearest at pointing to who we actually are. So how do you do it? Well, actually, do you know what? I don't remember as such, but my own version of it is this. I think to explore further into this, go to headless.org. I'll put a link below and have a look at some of the techniques he's got for it. But mine would be very simply, sit somewhere. It can be anywhere. It can be facing a wall, but it's nice out in nature. I do it a lot when I night fish. It just sort of drops me into it straight away. And the experience, the reflection of seeing that canvas that everything's painted on is very blissful in the body, but the bliss isn't it. Spirituality seems to get you to chase all the bliss. That isn't what it's about. Sit somewhere and first of all, try to take away all the names of anything. As we look around, we go tree, flower, bird, ground, grass, stone, lake, car, monster. Whatever it is we're looking at, take away those names, take away those concepts, and see if you can become somebody who's just dropped into this consciousness and doesn't know where anything is. Now notice that you can't see your own head. It's not there. All there is the scene in front of you. Now, with all the concepts dropped away, try to notice or try to discern where exactly your consciousness stops, where you stop and where everything else begins. And you'll notice it's pretty much impossible to do that. The consciousness is far-reaching. I expect this is what it's like for a baby. It's not so much I have discomfort, but discomfort is happening. Then you feel like consciousness is coming kind of through the back of your head and out the front, rather than emanating from the one point in your head. It's a feeling of decentralization. Now, this doesn't mean you live in it all the time. You can pop back in the body and you can go about your business and you can do whatever you like. It doesn't change who your personality is and what your interests and passions are. But it decentralizes stuff. The more you do this, the more it's a fascinating thing to do. I do it sometimes when I'm driving. I wouldn't recommend that. I don't know what would happen if somebody kind of popped through for the first time while they're driving. It could be a bit disastrous. But so, see if you can find any point where you end and everything around you begins. And I don't think you will. Now, having said that, it seems very short, it seems very simple, and I feel like it's of no use in a way. because I think, well, will people be able to do that? Who knows? Maybe they will. But I don't know. But all I can say is how elusive this tiny little shift is that has been bigged up over the centuries and millennia. The simplicity of it, when you see it, like the Waking Down Foundation in America, I forget the guy who runs that. Prepare for the disappointment of enlightenment. I love that. Not waking up, but waking down into our basic state. You become like a child again when this sticks and it becomes a permanent state. And you are open to anything. I think it's funny when people argue with me on Facebook because they say you're stuck in this viewpoint or that. I'm not really. You know, I just keep going. You might be right. You might be right. I don't know. I've been wrong so many times. So it takes away the desperate need to be right. I've got into more explanations of it now, haven't I? But just that you see, you can skirt around it. I think I've just said as much as I can say with those two little hints with the dreaming and the adapted headless way technique. So I'll leave it at that. If you can try that exercise, particularly while relating it back to dreaming and what is actually going on, the mechanics of dreaming, maybe it'll work. Let me know. Let me know if you have a better technique, if anybody is out there who has had an awakening, who at this corona scare is bringing out some beautiful technique to wake the world up, because then everybody's powerless, really, to manipulate you. I think it's interesting because there's all this business, you know, it's very popular these days, what's it called? Oh, I can't think. The one where you manifest stuff, you know. I don't know why it's escaped me now. And you can manifest your own realities. I think it's quite possible we're living in a multi-dimensional universe and we can jump from timeline to timeline and we can probably create our own outcome for this. There might be another version of you that has a horrible outcome and you're on a ventilator somewhere in a hospital, but maybe you can jump to the timeline where you come out of this far better, far more chilled than you went in. So that's my ideas, really. I would say, you see, my aim, my biggest pet hate, apart from all the dietary nonsense, is all the nonsense in spirituality. And I brought out a podcast called Carnivore and Beyond. I've got some great chats on there, particularly with my friend Zahir Khan, who speaks on this very eloquently, more eloquently than I possibly could. He's hilarious. He's a load of fun. Check out the chat on that. I'll put a link to that underneath. I might get him on for a few chats. Go to his website as well, fallingintothemystery.com. And maybe we'll have some chats. Now, as I said, I do consults, and at this time, if this resonates with anybody and you want to chat about this, or even just about me, whatever you want to do, but I'll put a link up to my my consults, and if you want to talk about this and how it relates to your own life and your own path, really happy to talk. At this time, people are broke. If you can't afford my fees, which are pretty low anyway, just make me an offer. Contact me. I don't know. I'd do it for free. I don't know. Whatever. But be fair with me. I have to eat too. But it would be lovely to be able to communicate with some people who are maybe going through this as well. Whatever you like. But anyway, hit us up. Have a look at humanunleashed.com for our more in-depth chats about this. And you know, I hope that did some good. I still feel like I haven't hit the nail on the head. I'm not sure if there is a nail or it has a head or if it can even be hit. But that's my 2 pence worth anyway. Have a great Easter. Enjoy your families and chill out. It's okay. It's all okay. Speak to you soon.